Vinayak and I attend this conference. We've been doing this routine for about 7 years together, and Vinayak has been doing it 2 years ahead of me, 10 years ago now. We go to the conference and we commit ourselves ahead of the conference that we're going to do top 10 takeaways in Austin, Dallas, Houston. So that makes us that much more engaged, and we are actively attending the conference, and every session, every day we're thinking, okay, this part of our top 10 list doesn't look like an interesting one. So this is good fun activity for us too. So we do that. So the way we'll work is I'll start with an overview, quick overview, and then we'll take turns to cover our top 10. So that's 12 plus 2. So the basic overview of the conference was just last week, like Ron said, in Washington DC, 2,200 attendees or so. And one thing to note is I realized going to the website several weeks before the date of the conference, it was sold out. So, and I think last year it was about 2,000 attendees or so. So seems to. So an overall observation also is, in general, the interest continues to increase. The data shows the practice of Agile continues to increase also. You can question whether people are really following Agile or doing lip service or with a valid. Anybody in the group who attended the conference last week? I'm not talking with it, so keep an eye on what we say. There were about 300 sessions across 5 days, Monday through Friday, and Monday was a parallel day where there was an executive forum full day. In this case, happened to be in a slightly different venue further away, and then so 300 sessions. I attended that Monday session, so I missed one keynote of Monday, and then there was 2 other keynotes on Wednesday morning and Friday. So I'll give a quick intro for what got covered in the keynotes, because keynotes give you a sense of the theme of the conference. So the Wednesday keynote was by Jessie, and I can't pronounce her last name. She's an improv comedy performer, and she did a great job of drawing the parallel between improv comedy format and teamwork in Agile. So the theme of collaboration, improv depends on collaboration. You have to make your team members and partners look good. That's the fundamental premise of improv, and that's basically what applies directly to that. So that was a good, relevant keynote. And the Friday keynote was by Jim Tan. He's written a book called Radical Collaboration. We talked a lot about the culture, 2 contrasting cultures that are found in companies, red zone, green zone, and how green zone companies tend to be consistently high performers, and we'll cover more details of that. But that keynote covered essentially how to be better collaborators by not being defensive, and having some concrete actionable tips on how not to be defensive. So that was the overview. Maybe now you can cover the Monday keynote, what got covered by Luke Homan.
Hello. Yeah. So Luke Homan is known to have authored innovation games, and he's a gamification man. So in his keynote address, he talked about taking problems that we normally solve using Agile in our companies and doing the same thing to solve bigger problems in the society. So here he was talking about a city such as Seattle, which has a deficit budget of a few $1 billion. Now they have a number of projects. So by playing games like we do Buy a Feature or Speedboat, playing such games, they actually changed those games to online games, and citizens played those games to actually rank various projects to order them in their order of priority or preference. So that was one learning. And the second learning, what they learned when they took this and implemented on a bigger scale, they learned something, and then they took that knowledge and implemented it back in the corporate implementation of Agile. So it was a very interesting session.
Let's carry on with the overview. Thanks for that. So there were 17 tracks. Last year was also 17. The one new track in green you see here was the government this year, and there was a fair amount of coverage, and partly I guess because of the location being Washington DC, so that makes sense. Even in the executive forum, they had great presentation from the government side of how Agile is being used in various government organizations. So otherwise, same other 16 tracks that were last year. We attended 40 between Vinayak and I. We attended roughly 40 sessions around. So just keep that in mind. There were 300 sessions over the week. We attended 40, so it's a small kind of a subset sample that we have our perspective based. So we may miss some interesting stuff, possibly. So, but this is what we took away, and our takeaway is essentially some takeaways come from a specific session. We attended a session, we made it to a list of session. Some takeaways cut across sessions. We attended multiple sessions, had some conversations in an open jam session, and that gave us an aha to make it to a list of it. So that's a mix of both. So we have total of 14 topics here, 12 actual takeaways, and then one each of us has our catch-all page of sound bites that we thought were interesting takeaway sound bites, but it warranted a page by sound. So with that, I'm going to alternate, so we have a little bit of a variety in voices for you guys to get to start with the next number one.
So this time's keynote address by James Tam, who's a judge, and he is author of a book on collaboration. So it was very eye-opening because there was a conclusion or a takeaway here that do what you want, but unless you have the right culture in your organization, which is a culture of collaboration, you're not really going to go far in terms of Agile. So what James has done is he has just divided, for the sake of simplicity, in two types of organizations. One he calls as the red zone organizations, which are characterized by what you see here: low trust, high blame, feeling of fear of failure. So everybody is on the guard, typically what we call as CIA, withholding energy. People don't want to commit to take big steps because they're scared that if they fail, things will go wrong. Attitude of entitlement. I have completed X number of years in this company, so I'm entitled to this. So this kind of attitude of entitlement, cynicism and suspicion. Overall, you can make out when you are in red zone, you can make out that this is highly politically ridden kind of setup that I am in, and I am not giving my 100%, I'm withholding energy, and I'm on the guard. So that's what, and I need to be externally motivated. I don't feel like doing things myself. I need to be incented by someone, and then I might do that, but there's no internal motivation. So I need to be moved, not motivated. Actually, external motivation is actually moving, not motivating. Whereas on the other hand, he characterized organizations which are called green zone organizations or teams, which are exactly the opposite. High trust, mutual support, collaborative environment, dialogue and shared vision, honesty and openness, cooperation, risk taking. So people are not having any fear of failure, right? You can fail and learn from failure, and it's okay to do so. Sincerity and optimism, and also the work is pleasurable. So, and you are not needing any external motivation because internally you are feeling like doing things and you are motivated, not you need not be moved. So after this, there was a survey conducted of about 207 companies across 20 industries, which we'll cover later, and they took survey of companies which were red zone type of companies and green zone type of companies, and saw how they performed differently over a period of 11 years. And here's the result. So the green zone companies, the net income was 755% up over 11 years, stock price 800+%, revenue 516, and workforce 246%. So the results were quite clear. It was quite clear looking at the results that it's not only a pleasure working in a collaborative environment, but it also yields financial results and rewards. So let me ask a question here, that if I were to ask you one single thing that differentiates or which is a characteristic of a red zone organization. What is it? Anyone?
Other than those?
I have to pick up one thing that really is characteristic of a red zone organization. So what is it? Yeah, you were saying? All that. No. I mean, out of that,
High turnover?
high turnover is the result. But why? What is it that results into the organization being red? Right? I mean, high turnover is the result of that. Unwillingness to change, good one. Unhappy employees is again a result. Why unhappy?
Trust.
Trust, that's a big one. So lack of trust. Yeah. So actually why this lack of trust? Let me dig a little detail. That is also a result. Why lack of trust? Why people are not trusting each other as easily? What do they have? Blaming each other. Yeah. So when you are always having this fear that somebody will blame you. So
hierarchy structure,
yeah, hierarchical structure is again behind us, but what happens here is, what James jumped to the answer is the main thing is people go defensive, right? So that is the key to it. So why this fear is that you are on defensive. You have this fear of failure, and you have this feeling that you're being observed and you're being managed, etc. So in which case you have this, you're on the defensive. So that is the main differentiator, that people can't really collaborate very easily when you build walls around yourself. You can't really build good teams when the other person is not open. So this openness goes down when you go in a cocoon and you are on the defensive. So that is the main key behind all this that happens. So the short answer to this is, how do you prevent yourself from going into, and everyone has to take care of his own not being defensive. He himself has to make sure that he or she doesn't go on the defensive. So he has given, before we go there, this is the survey that I had referred to earlier, so you can take a quick look at this. This was already covered earlier. So how do you overcome defensiveness? So there are 3 steps that he talked about. First of all, it is important that you notice that you are going on the defensive. That is the first step. So if you don't even notice that you are going on defensive, you will not do anything about it. So how do you notice? So there are some external signs or initial signs that you see that you are going on the defensive. For example, you might feel a bit fidgety, or you might start talking very fast, or some people start breathing fast, or you have a tight stomach, or there are various physical conditions that happen when you feel that you're being attacked and you try to form a wall around yourself. So that is the first sign of you going on the defensive, and you have to take action immediately on that. So again, he had suggested there are different ways of overcoming this feeling of being defensive and being open again is different for different people. So somebody can go for a walk and take his mind away from this feeling, or someone can just do something else, keep himself busy doing some other work, or someone can go for a workout, or somebody can go for a glass of wine, whatever. But doing any of these things that you have to decide for yourself, you overcome this feeling that you are going on the defensive and stay open, and that is what will result into an open, collaborative culture in your company, which would make all the difference that we just talked about. So it was a very useful takeaway and something that we can implement.
And number 2 takeaway, do you want to cover your Schneider model?
Yeah, so take a quick look at the Schneider model. So this is how you can, there's another model of deciding 4 quadrants in which you can divide companies. So on the left hand side what you see is what is characterized by people, and on the right hand side what you see characterized by the management or the organization, so the company. On the left hand side, people are wanting more collaborative in reality. They want, what is the culture? Culture is, if you go to a company and ask the employees there, that what is it like this in this company? What is the value system? So on day one, if an employee joins and he asks his friend, what is it like in this company? The words that he would hear would actually characterize the culture of the company. So those are the words which are written. So collaborative culture is where employees say words like affiliation, team, and so if you hear these words, that's the collaborative culture. Control is a culture where in that company you have procedures that you can't do this, you can't do that. There are rules and regulations for everything. Bureaucratic organization. Competence is where you have a culture of stars, where meritocracy is there. Everyone is talking about X, Y, Z person, how he did well by doing so and so thing, etc. And cultivation is a culture where people's talent is nurtured. So you hear words like dedication, growth, faith, evolution, creativity. So these are the 4. As the Schneider model says, these are the 4 main types of cultures of organizations. So you can quickly classify any organization in one of these 4 a good model.
Okay, now on to the number 2. Second takeaway for us was this topic of scaling. So this has been around for a while, where you have hundreds of Agile teams and thousands of developers in the organization. What technique do you use to actually coordinate and scale the Agile methods in the organization? So there are 4 techniques that seems to stand out, but the main takeaway here is the SAFE framework, in spite of the criticisms around it, which I will cover a little more in a few minutes, seems to be still the most dominant one people talk about, and large organizations seem to understand and follow. And the reason is, I'll show a picture of it. Let me show the picture. It is a very visual framework. So it has, I don't know how many of you have seen this picture of a SAFE framework, which has portfolio level, program level, and then team level of processes very well defined. There are consultants out there who can do training on this, and they can coach the teams and all that. So this seems to be a comfortable framework that most large organizations, sometimes with some customization, appear to match. So that's the main takeaway. The other frameworks that are discussed in large-scale Agile are, of course, one is Scrum of Scrums by Jeff Sutherland, and then Craig Larman's large-scale Scrum, and then Scott Ambler's discipline Agile delivery. So the data. So I took a few data, and I'll show more data. This is from the same survey that Ron was urging you guys to do for this year, the 10th version 1 Agile State of Agile survey. So this is from the most recent version last year. So what it shows is, in terms of scaling methods used right now, the Scrum, which is the default, is of course the dominant one. But really something more structured, organized, the only one that stands out, as you see, is the scaled Agile framework, 19%. The DAD and large-scale Scrum are 3 or 4%. So the SAFE seems to be, in spite of essentially all pushbacks and being considered overly heavy framework, still seems to be the framework of choice. That's the main takeaway of this topic. Good night.
Moving on to number 3. So, how many of you have heard about the lean startup? Right? So, it's a very popular way for even large companies, not only startups, large companies including governments, to validate their hypothesis before they launch the product. So, everyone is now jumping onto the bandwagon of doing lean startup because it's been extremely successful. So, it's a kind of movement. Last year, myself and Hemant, we also attended the lean startup conference in San Francisco. About 700 people were there, 700 entrepreneurs. So it's a popular movement, and it's essentially extending Agile in the sense that in Agile you have the iteration ending with software that is working and to be tested, but it continues to get tested in the market in the case of lean startup. So you not only test it in the test environment, but you test it actually by launching it in the market and see if it is doing what it is, getting the behavior from your end users, the expected behavior, right? So this is what thinking about lean startup is. And everyone is trying to experiment and validate. But there are some mistakes that people are making while doing these experiments. What are those mistakes? The first mistake is that you have to understand that you have to validate in series. So there are steps that hypothesis about problem has to be validated first before you start solving the problem. Whether that problem exists, who is having that problem, how painful that problem is, and is it worth solving? I mean, is the customer ready to pay money to solve that problem? All this has to be validated even before you start thinking of the solution. But by and large, what we observe is most of the validation or experiments are in market validation. So engineers are wired to build. So what engineers do? They will build a product or a prototype and start testing it in the market. That here's a solution that will solve the problem, but then have you validated whether the problem even exists and it's worth solving? So that's, confusion in terms of the step that you are supposed to take. So you jump stages. The second is unidentified assumptions. So assumptions are, whenever you have a hypothesis, there are certain assumptions that are underlying that. What are the risky assumptions in this? That is technology a risky assumption? Is it possible to build something like this? Is it going to work in the environment? Or, as it happens in many cases, most of the cases, the riskiest assumption is customer will pay money to buy this product. This is the riskiest assumption. So, you have to state those assumptions explicitly and validate them. So people don't, while conducting these experiments, they have statements like, now with this latest and greatest widget that I have built, the customer can easily track himself while he is traveling from X location to Y. Now, it's good, but will the customer do it? So there's a big assumption that customer want to do what you want him to do. Unfalsifiable hypothesis. Let's build this, put it in the market and see what happens, right? Now, whatever happens, how do you know that it's success or failure? What are the criteria? So you have to draw a line in the sand and say that, okay, I'll launch this product, and if I get 20% market share in 1 year, then it's a success. Or if I get 20 orders in first week, it's a success. If I don't get it, it's a failure. You have to draw some metric and decide that this hypothesis is falsified in case this metric is not satisfied. But people don't do that. They test it, but they don't know what they are testing, what they are measuring. So that's the third problem. Metrics are not actionable. I got 20,000 likes on Facebook. What do you do with 20,000 likes on Facebook? If you get 20 orders, you can execute them, but you can't do anything with Facebook likes, right? So there are several. Eric Ries has a law. Has somebody heard about Eric Ries' law? Eric Ries' law says that at any given point of time, however badly your product is doing, however badly your company is doing, there is one metric. If you go to Google Analytics, there is one metric that is doing well. So you can use that for whatever claims you have, right? So that's what people tend to do. That the metrics that they are measuring are actually reinforcing their own beliefs and their own wishful thinking. So meaningful metrics are very important. Actionable metrics are very important. Wrong metrics. So there was a story. The story is about something like GoToMeeting or WebEx, right? In WebEx and GoToMeeting, you are having presentations where you can put slides and present them. So somebody had this bright idea that, okay, we'll build a product in which we'll allow people to upload videos and then have video presentations simultaneously running and being shared across streaming videos. Great idea. So how will you measure whether it's successful or not? So they decided to measure the success by measuring counting the number of presenters uploading videos. Is it the right metric? No, right? I mean, if there are thousands of presenters wanting you to see their videos, that's not the metric. How many people are actually playing back those videos? Okay? So they built a feature saying that, hey, everyone wants to upload videos, but because of the bandwidth and timings, etc., people were not ready to watch those videos. So it was a wrong metric that was measured. So these are some of the common mistakes. So pictorially presenting, people should put the cart before the horse. You should validate the product without you should validate the product without validating whether it's solving a problem that is even worth solving.
Number four takeaway was for any successful agile transformation, this conclusion that there are only two key requirements: good DevOps and the right collaborative culture. If you have those two and you follow the essence of agile, which is inspect and adapt, you'll get there. All other practices are, whether you do TDD or not, whether you're using story points or not, if you have those fundamentals, then with all the DevOps, you'll have the continuous integration, continuous delivery, so feedback loop will be tight. And if you have the right culture, you'll actually listen to the feedback and you'll do the right. So that's essentially the core essence to keep in mind. And of course, we covered that ultimately all culture drives performance, use our data. So you see a consistent theme throughout this conference, and our takeaway: culture drives performance. If you have the right culture, most of the things will resolve themselves. And there was a separate session on DevOps. I wanted to highlight that in the executive session. So DevOps is pretty much mainstream right now. So I'm assuming most of you already understand it, follow. So to drive the point home on the culture, so this was presented at Project here, and so many of you have seen the Agile Manifesto. This one, right? Bottom line is you can pretty much ignore all the principles, all the values and everything, and just focus on individuals and interactions. So that's the main kind of takeaway this one. And in another session, they covered this topic that stood out to me, that ultimately culture, think of culture as their anchor. It's an anchor in a good way and a bad way. In a good way, meaning it keeps you it keeps you there and without going in wrong directions, but it also keeps you there if it is bad. It's very difficult to change. It is the inertia of the organization, and everything else is around.
Yeah, there was another presentation by Paweł Brodzinski. This person is the CEO of a company called Logic. It's a company in Poland, and they have experimented with a new concept called no management. So what is no management? Essentially it means what the thinking behind this is everyone is a leader, so we don't really require managers to manage this. Everyone has leadership qualities, so in a good cross-functional team, leadership qualities of individuals need to be cultivated, and we don't really require managers. So no management essentially means no managers. So why this? It has been observed that only 13% employees are engaged. They don't feel, they don't have a sense of ownership in terms of doing something that they want to do because they feel the sense of ownership. So this is a Gallup poll. The problem, as somebody just saying, I think you said, that is with hierarchy, right? Hierarchy has, as a result of hierarchy, the power to take decisions is concentrated only in a few hands. So as a result, people say it's not my problem, it's management's problem. So they always look upward to the management to take decisions, and management doesn't even have, they don't have the information that management has, so they can't even take decisions even if they were allowed to take those decisions. So that transparency is not there. Even having transparency is important. The other extreme is democracy. In a democratic kind of decision making, what's likely to happen is, consensus is difficult to arrive. So, you have to have somebody who will stand up and stick his neck out and say, hey, I am responsible for the decision. If something goes wrong, it's my decision. Unless you have someone backing it up, consensus is difficult to arrive, and it ends up in endless discussions and indecisiveness. So at Lunar Logic, what they said that anyone can take a decision who feels that he wants to take a certain decision which is good for the company. He can decide, provided he has consulted the expert, the right expert in that area, and provided he has also he has taken into account what is the impact on the people affected. So anyone can decide. It's not that, and for which, as we will see later, you need to have adequate information. If decision is to be made, adequate information has to be given. So, what they observed was leadership percolated, and people started making decisions which they had never thought of doing themselves before. So overall, the company's progress and the cycle times improved. The decision delays in decision making were reduced. As there are two prerequisites. As one of them I already said, that you need to have the information transparency. Without having that information, no decision can be made. And the second is freedom of failure. So, if you are fearful of failure, you will not make decisions. So, if you are allowed to fail and learn from the failure, then in that case, that you have the confidence to make decisions. At Lunar Logic, they have transparent salaries. They actually publish their salaries. It's not only published to their own employees, but to the world. So anybody can go and see anyone's salary who is working at Lunar Logic. So that has actually forced them to be fair in paying people. So everyone knows what he is getting and why he is getting what he is getting, and what he is not getting and why he is not getting what he is not getting. Control, people ask the CEO himself that you're letting go of your control. So how does it feel? So he said, yeah, control used to feel good. Letting go of control doesn't feel good. But what I realized that controlling was just it was an illusion. Really speaking, when they published the salaries, there were no surprises for anyone. Everyone already knew everything. Right? So he had this false sense of control that he was controlling information and not letting people know about it, but people already knew everything. So control is an illusion. Yeah, that's just another principle. Lack of engagement is a result of lack of autonomy. So if you don't have the autonomy to decide, if somebody is going to drive you, in that case you will not feel engaged. We talked in the beginning, I think we were talking about cultural pockets. So same thing happened in Lunar Logic. That there were some people who resisted the idea of openness, who resisted the idea of giving control away. They wanted to maintain their own kingdom within, so they wanted to have that control and hierarchy. So those were cultural pockets, and they resisted the idea of no management. 20% of the people, 10 to 20% of the people actually left Lunar Logic when they made this change. So this was one good topic that got discussed.
So the next takeaway is now that you got no management, no estimates. So this was something new last year that we picked up. So this is interesting, fresh thinking. It's an extreme viewpoint, but I think it makes a lot of sense as a way to balance the overdoing of estimates we all find ourselves in software company. So many teams spend hours and days and weeks doing bottom-up estimate to what appears to be a very precise estimate of a project. And that's, I think, what is will. Have you heard of hashtag no estimate? So I highly recommend it. I think it is a somewhat unrealistic, in my opinion, an extreme viewpoint, but it's a good viewpoint to bring a balance in this estimation exercise we have found ourselves. So the point is that so this question, he's still evangelizing it. Still, a lot of people like the idea. A lot of people have, of course, naturally a lot of questions, and they feel it cannot be applied. So there's a case study last year in a conference that I brought back to point out here. This company called Statoil, their VP of Finance, he talked about how they have this topic of beyond budgeting. They have written a book on it. They run the company without budget. So there's a case study of existence proof for large companies doing it actually. So, but back to the no estimate idea, that this is a good viewpoint, and at next page I'll show you some balancing rebuttals. But other things to confirm this idea is that the data shows that most of the estimates are wrong anyways, and a statistical approach rather than a bottom-up approach is a better way. So if you if you had 10 epics, you took a sample of 3 of them and did a t-shirt sizing estimate, then just extrapolated from there the rest of the epics, you probably get just as good epics. So spending hours and weeks and days doing a bottom-up estimate is not a good use of time. All estimates are guessed anyway, and in this there is an interesting discussion, I'm sure, close to this. The point of uncertainty is bogus. The argument a lot of us have believed from the textbooks and books around estimation numbers years ago. If you dig underneath that, looks like some of that was conceptual picture, not really based in empirical data. So the point of uncertainty is being questioned. So, and of course, when you do estimates, they're always a tussle. You do give a better estimate, you get better requirements. And better requirements is always a challenge in software development. How do you get what you requirements? That's the whole point of doing inspecting that. So it's a never-ending battle. So I highly recommend following the thread and look for these 2 resources. One is Steve O'Connell, who wrote the book on software estimation. His short video on he argues against it, and then Ron Jeffries' discussion with that video to bring a more balanced viewpoint. I think those are worth checking out to get yourself still centered on this topic of estimation.
Last year we had the same session in which I talked about user experience in a team, how remotely you can manage user experience in an Agile team. And I had come up with the takeaway was that user experience has to be done in a waterfallish way prior to starting the Agile iterations. So you do the user experience design and everything, because the type of people that are involved there, they can't be really time boxed. It's a creative exercise and you can't time box creativity. That was the logic there. And I always thought that user experience is something which is not easy to do it remotely, and definitely not in Agile iterations. And to my surprise, this time we had a presenter. Her name is Mary Brody, and she is from Dallas, and we didn't know about her. It was a surprise that she said not only she is doing it in Agile, she is doing it remotely, and she is doing it for the last 14 years. So that was a big takeaway this time, that how does she do it? So I'll quickly go to the next page. So there are 6 ways to bridge this gap when you are doing user experience design from a remote location. So don't depend only, easy thing is, okay, apply them down. Have face-to-face interaction. That's the easy thing, but that is not the only thing. Meeting in person is not the only way. Making friends is necessary. So what she's saying is that don't treat time spent on making friends with your team members who are remotely located as an overhead. It is a necessity. Unless you have a culture of which is collaborative, you make friends with people who are working with you. It's not going to work, right? So for a remote team to work where user experience is more of a, there is no explicit information being transacted, tacit information gets transacted in user experience design, which happens through social interactions. And to have social interactions, you need to have friendship. That's a given thing. So build friendships. And how do you make friendships? Okay, you have been making friendships online. So it's not unusual today to talk about online friendships. So use that, use all the technology which is available. You have WhatsApp and Snapchat and Facebook and whatnot to know the family, friends, and what is the work and outside work life of the person whom you are talking. The third thing she talked about is to broadcast. So when we say, when we are in a co-located environment, actually when we have face-to-face, the teams sit down close to each other. We know each other what we are doing, right, without having to tell. So this information is not there when you have the teams which are remotely located. So how do you overcome that? You overcome that by publishing every time you. So one of the suggestions is that you take a Skype group and go on announcing in the Skype group whatever you are doing. I just finished this particular document. Here's the document. I have just uploaded this code. I have checked it in. I have done this. I have tested this. I have filed the parts. So whatever you are doing, just keep announcing as if you are telling it to somebody who is standing behind you. Whatever he will see what you are doing is made known to everyone. The fourth thing, important takeaway here is nobody reads. We expect people to read what we are writing. We write long emails, we make documents, and we expect people to read those documents, and nobody reads. So that's the, actually if you see, the tacit exchange is something which is much better than the explicit exchange of information. So we believe that if you make an explicit exchange by making a document, the information will reach the other person, which never happens. So the right way to do here is, in a remote kind of situation, you make it real by actually opening the document in Google Hangout and walking the other guy through it by talking about each and every line and important highlights in that document. So you read the document along with your team member, and that is where it actually reaches. Till then, it will just remain a hyperlink or a document wherever. And if you feel that if there is a need, don't hesitate to call the person and have face-to-face or rather one-on-one communication. She also talked about playing games like Q-Common. So in a situation where you are trying to determine what are the requirements, there is a game called Speed Code. You can look it up. Q-Common's innovation games. So there is another game called using funny money, where you are buying features, buy a feature. So that it's a kind of game where you put some value in the feature. So when you play these games, it is possible to play these games using remotely using interfaces, web interfaces. It actually brings out playfulness in the whole process, the ceremony in the whole process, and ice breaking happens. People start collaborating better, and you are being brutally honest. Look, I don't like this feature. I'm not going to buy it. Okay? I put zero value on it. It's people become very honest. Also, the second thing that she talked about is avoiding distractions, because very often you find that it is not possible for people to remain aloof or isolated in a face-to-face situation. But when you are offline, or rather when you are online in a Google Hangout or on Skype, it is possible for a person to be checking his text messages or doing something else. So there are lots of distractions, and it is possible for you to not be attentive in such a situation. So how do you bring back the attention of somebody who is not being attentive, who is kind of multitasking, doing two things at the same time? So one is to ask a question. right? You ask a question, do something to bring that person's attention. Second is you do something unpredictable, right? So that he's taken by a surprise and his attention comes back. Third thing is you bring an external speaker or a guest speaker so that there is a change of voice. That always helps. So these are some of the ways of bringing attention of people who kind of tend to lose their attention. The next thing that we talked about there was user experience designer should always treat himself or herself as a facilitator. So whenever there is an idea which is being brought up by someone, you should encourage that person to talk about that idea by sharing mouse control or keyboard control. Okay, come on, let me hear, let me see what you have in your mind. Just draw it here or type what you want. So that way, getting collaboration from by facilitating collaboration, you are able to get ideas. For which you have to listen, not listen to respond, which is very important. Many times we are listening with a plan to respond. That is not the right thing to do. The right thing is you are listening for the sake of listening because there is value in something else that someone else is saying. So these are some of the key takeaways in this session by Mary Cody. And this is a list of tools. So I'm just going to be sharing this PowerPoint deck. So there are various stages of user experience process in which you can use these tools to collaborate from a remote location, remote UX team.
So the next takeaway for us was this topic of team dependencies, the number of teams. This was from a session by Troy McGinnis. He used analytical approaches to illustrate the problem, the solutions, and empirical data. So the main thing, couple of main things here. First thing is this takeaway of understanding the impact of dependency. When you have dependencies across team, even if you have one dependency, it reduces your flexibility to order the stories by half. So every dependency removed doubles your chances, and then because the teams are not in order, then one team being delayed delays other teams, and so on. So he analytically showed that if you have 5 features and 4 dependencies, then only the one unique way of ordering these options. So he did a lot of work on that. Ultimately, empirically, they took a case study and they laid out there were some number of teams that were doing the work, and they graphically mapped them the dependencies on each other. By looking at the graph, you could tell that the clusters of close dependencies, and from there you could draw conclusions of where to merge the teams so the dependencies came together within the team and to be solved problem, where you could co-locate the teams and solve it that way. So those are good advice, and the takeaway was this, that don't be afraid. The magic number of team being 7 plus minus 2 is still a good number, but in some cases there are too many dependencies, probably better to have a larger team of 15 or so. So up to 15% team is okay if that helps you get over dependencies. Otherwise, 7 plus minus 2 is still a good number. And having cross-skill team, of course, having multiple skills in the same team also helps you reduce the dependencies, but you have to be careful and not to have any more than new hires of 30% in a team. Otherwise, the learning curve comes in the way of team productivity. So these are the techniques to get over merge teams, create a multifunctional team, or co-locate teams to get over those dependencies. But don't hesitate from having a larger team to get over the dependency issue.
Yeah, so there was a very interesting session by Alan Shalloway. So those of you who have been developers have read the 23 design patterns. So that's a book by Gang of Four, 23 design patterns. Many of you, I have tried reading the book. By the time I read the 23rd pattern, I forgot what the first pattern. Right? I mean, it's a pain reading that book, honestly, and I was close to read it, so I went through it, but there I really got down to practice. Okay, now let's follow observer pattern in this. Right? I can't really relate a pattern to a problem And I really appreciate people who can do it, but it's beyond me. And it's so with many of us. That we need something like some 20% of this which delivers 80% of the value. It may not be all encompassing, it may not deliver 100% of the value, but as Alan Chalove covered in this session, there's something which delivers value. So there are some basic principles if you follow, you're doing most of what is written in that kind of core book. So what are those basic principles? Encapsulate anything that changes. So if you are, for example, having encryption, 64-bit encryption or 128-bit encryption. So make an object called encryption object and encapsulate whatever be the encryption type in that object. So that was the first thing. Write code for testability. Think what the tester is going to test tomorrow, because in an agile iteration of 2 weeks, you're not going to give the entire thing to the tester on the last day. He will not, the poor fellow will not have time to test it, and even if he tests and files bugs, you will not have time to fix it. Right? So you have to run in parallel. So think of what you're going to give every day to the tester at the end of the day, which forces you to break down your code into smaller modules. Right? You can't have a monolithic piece of code. You have to break it down in smaller modules so that the tester can test it. Not only that, you have to break it down in smaller modules, but you have to tell the tester what it does. You have to have well-defined responsibilities for that module. Not only that, you have to tell the tester what it is doing, but you have to allow him to test it by having an interface, well-defined interface. Right? So what did we learn? Right? Testability means modular design, decoupled by well-defined interfaces, having well-defined responsibilities. So that is what good architecture is all about. So making your code testable is in fact one and the same thing as having good architecture. So that was the second big thing. I'll talk about this later with the help of a picture. Entities should be open for extension, but it should be closed for modification. Favor aggregation over inheritance. Many times people use inheritance for everything, right? You have to favor aggregation over inheritance. Comments. There are probably comments telling what the code does. Now, if you require comments to tell what the code is doing, that means your code is not very documented. It has to be self-documenting code. You don't need comments to tell what the code is doing. By reading the code, one should be able to tell what it is. So that was one more tip. The best of all was programming by intention. So while you are writing code, you should assume that magically you are going to get the interfaces and the methods that you need. Somebody has already written those for you. Don't start writing all the code inside your method. So externalize as much of it as possible by coding by intention. So that was again a big learning. So these are the pictures which I have to share. So find what varies and encapsulated to the same example I talked about, encryption. Don't do the thing on the left hand side, which is inheritance. So on the left hand side, you see that chip is being inherited by 64-bit chip and 1-bit gate, so that's the wrong way to do it. Do aggregation instead. So externalize an encryption object and then have inheritance within that. Yeah, this is another important thing. Relationship between any entity A and any other entity B in a system should be limited such that if A uses B or A makes B, never both. Right? If A is using B, then A should not be making B. You should make it somewhere else. So you have factory methods, so do it externally. Never have the same thing, never combine these two things. So these are some of the simple nuggets that actually tell 80% of what is covered in that gang of code book, which was very good in a short session. I was able to learn a lot, which otherwise would have taken me days, if not weeks. Thank you.
The next takeaway was from the data from State of Agile survey. So I alluded to it earlier. This is the one that Ron reminded. So the 10th Agile survey data is being collected right now. So this is the last available one, which was data collected end of last year or second half of last year. And I picked a few highlights that what I thought were useful. So there are 4,000 respondents, just like this survey, they're collecting data. So a few highlights were good to take away from. First is the current states. Only if you ask companies, are you following Agile or not, 95% in some form, in some parts of the organization are following. So definitely it's only 5% companies report that they're not doing any Agile in any instances. So that's good to know. Second is of that 95% or so that are in the Agile, only a third of them, 34%, are in the self-report as they're in the very early stages of Agile. Only 18% are really in the state of mature adoption. So if you guys find yourself in the early stages, you are probably mainstream. Next takeaway was the reasons for them to transition to Agile. So the two main top reasons, again not surprising. First one is to accelerate the product delivery. The rapid cycles of delivery, obviously that's a good way we see all the time with our clients. Second is to be able to accommodate the changing priorities. So that makes sense. Those are the reasons why companies look to Agile. And the final kind of a key highlight from the data is that distributed Agile, the state of distributed Agile. A couple of years ago, a third of the companies were doing distributed Agile. Right now, 80% or so companies have practicing some form of distributed Agile. That's good to know that distributed Agile is mainstream right now.
So how many of you are involved in hiring? Good. So this is a very interesting session. Takeaways are very interesting. So what is lean or agile hiring? Normally people mistake the hiring process when it's agile. You have to do fancy things like pairing. So instead of interview, you have pairing sessions, and those are the fancy things which is quite impressive, right? But what is important is that you will do pairing in the interview, but when he joins your organization and actually starts working on the job, is he going to be pairing? So don't do audition or what we call as pairing only for the sake of doing it. Do it only if after he joins your company, pairing is the norm. If everybody is pairing and that is what is required by the job, then only you should do it. Don't do it for the sake of doing it. Filtering on tools, very often we ask, have you used so and so tool? Node.js, Ember.js, Angular.js, so and so tool, right? So don't measure in the interview, don't talk about just the tools, because tools and technologies time a dozen. Every day new one may come. So you have to talk about what are the basic capabilities to learn new tools and technologies. It doesn't matter if he is not aware of a particular tool or not. Look for behaviors, not practice. Have you done TDD? Have you done DDD? Do you do this? Do you do so many agile practices, right? I mean, there are many people who have gone through the motions. Actually, I met one person over lunch who says that we do everything. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, test-driven development. Whatever you think of in the agile practice our company is doing it. I said, surprising. It's very hard to find someone saying that our company does everything. How come your company is so advanced and so many steps ahead of everybody else? What is the secret? They said, you know what? If you don't do it, you'll be fired. So which is so anti-agile, right? I mean, what's the whole point? Right? So people don't get the point. So, don't go by practices, right? Practices, you can have people going through the motions without understanding the principles behind those practices. So look for behaviors, not practices. Screening resume is all of you know, it's very painful. Screening resume, there are pages after pages of hype that you are doing. And, not. So what do? So the way to overcome this is by having a group, someone from HR, a hiring manager, and somebody like a Scrum Master. They put together a team, and in this team of 3 people, they have to classify the resumes in 3 files, yes, no, and maybe. And wherever there is a disagreement, there is a discussion. And why do you think I am saying yes, you are saying no, why so? In the interview, ask open-ended question. It should give rise to a conversation. If you ask a question which has an answer like yes and no, the conversation ends there. The idea is to seed the conversation, and the conversation has to begin with the question, not end with it. So questions are tell me more about, tell me when such and such thing happened, what happened, what would you do if such and such thing happens. For testing adaptability, whether someone is ready to change, inspect and adapt, you will ask the question, were you surprised? And when were you surprised? And what did you do when you were surprised? So when you see something that you were not expecting, what happened? Cultural misfits, as we already seen, culture is a big thing. It results in frustration. Yeah, so inspect and adapt as implemented for hiring, Kanban. So, you know what happens is when we have a hiring process where you are sending a lot of resumes with the expectation that the more you send, the higher are the chances of finding a match. So actually what you're doing is exactly the opposite of what is advised in the lean approach. In the lean approach, any resume that is not selected is a waste, right? So you are increasing waste by sending more resumes. So the right thing to do is to follow Kanban with the WIP method. So that is what Joanna Rothman actually projected. So what she's talking about is ranking the resumes and then taking 3 or 4 or 5 resumes at a time. Once you take a limited number of resumes, you get early feedback. Instead of indefinitely waiting for the feedback, get early feedback, which is very important. If the top 3 or top 4 resumes are not suitable, in that case there is no point sending another 20, right? Why these 4 are not suitable? Tell me more. Get the feedback and then, so the inspect and adapt has to be implemented using this Kanban board with steps like what is mentioned and with WIP limits there. And yeah, this is the pictorial representation. So take top 3 and take feedback, building quick cycles.
Alright, now my last one, which is a collection of sound bites. So these are sound bites that kept track of throughout the conference sessions, and they were thought-provoking or interesting to me in some way, worth noting, but didn't warrant to be a separate page. So I'll go through each one of them. And then I have a similar page at the end of this top of the page. First one is, we've known it before, but good to hear that don't break your Scrum teams at time zone or geography boundaries. You can have distributed Agile, but the Scrum teams have to be intact in one time zone or one geography. We often find people miss this point, just to be reminded, good reminder. There's a data in the executive forum. It came up. There was a DevOps session, and there was the data presented that companies who are doing DevOps are 50% more productive. It's good hard data for DevOps. Last time we saw. Third one is individual performance management is still a $64 billion question. In the Agile world of team level performance management, performance reviews, and all that, where does individual? What do you do with individual performance reviews? I think Agile community is still not clear. At least I don't have an answer, and I'm still unanswered question. Another one was from Michael Feather's session. Software shapes business, so pay attention to the shape of your software. So if your software is a core part of your business, even if it is not very visible, keeping it in good shape, following craftsmanship, keeping technical debt under control are good things. That's core part of your business. Don't ignore it. The related point was that there's a carrying cost of dead code. So, like refactor code, you got to similarly do away with unused features and get rid of dead code. So, it's a similar topic, a soundbite I picked up at one of the previous conferences was, which is similar lines, is that code is a liability. The working feature or working functionality is an asset. So the minimum code you have, keeping the better off you are. So Don't keep hanging around dead code. Just not doesn't add any value. Last one on this page is there's no correlation between, for the knowledge workers, people who do knowledge work, like all of us in this room, there's no correlation between the physical effort and then the value, the value delivered. So counting hours and team utilization, those are bad metrics, the wrong metrics for management teams. So we should make, so it's very important to recognize, even if you might be appearing to sit idle, knowledge work, that they're actually solving a problem. That's the work. So counting hours and those utilization metrics actually misguided. Next one was back to the culture related topic. People are always awesome in all ways and always. So if there's something not working, look at the systems, the support systems around them. There's probably something that needs to be addressed. Then there was one on middle management. Looks like this came up many times that this was particularly one of Jim Best's session, or Stalwart session, that individuals tend to be collaborative by nature. But as soon as you make them middle managers, they become punitive. And middle managers seem to be core of the problem for a lot of agile dysfunctions that we see out there. So address middle management. Last one, my observation is topic of technical debt. Technical debt is generally well understood now. Most people understand it. The new aha here that I took away was resist the urge to quantify. Back to, I think, related to the NoEstimates talking. Spending too much time worrying about how much dollar worth of technical debt we are probably not useful. But keeping it visible is useful, and keep taking care of it. And also don't incur technical debt to go fast. If you deliver a feature fast and you keep using an excuse that you didn't do TDD or you took a shortcut to get a feature to the market fast and therefore incur technical debt, I used to think that's actually a valid reason. The advice is, no, that's not a good idea. If you need to get to market faster, reduce the scope of it, but do it right. So don't incur technical debt for that reason. Those are list of all my takeaways.
Docker was a big topic this time. DevOps and using platform as a service like Docker for DevOps. So what is Docker? Docker is a container, and in that container you put everything that you want. You can have a separate container, maybe one for the app server, one for the web server, one for the database, or you can combine it all and put it in one, and there is a sliver, a thin sliver of the operating system there. So you don't have a full replication of the operating system as you would do in the case of VM, where you replicate the entire image of the operating system. Here you are not doing that. So you take this Docker container and just put it, copy it, and it would work seamlessly. You can have it on the developer machine. Developer can develop and then hand over, and the tester can just copy this container on this, bring it up on this machine, which may be a Mac in that case, and developer may be using Windows. It still works seamlessly, and finally you can put it in production, maybe on a Linux server, and it still works well. So it brings out collaboration between dev, test, and ops. So that is the first important benefit of using Docker. Actually, you can reduce your total expense because you are not replicating the entire operating system. The total required CPU cycles and total required memory is less. So you can actually reduce your expense incurred on virtualizing everything. So there is this company out of Austin called Offers.com, which halved their AWS spend. And yesterday also I met one person who actually saved a lot of money, close to 60% of the spend on AWS cloud by using Docker. So it is possible. But it is not yet production ready, is what I know. So Offers.com had problems while scaling because the automation that is required, the level of automation that is available with AWS is still not available with Docker. So it's not yet totally production ready, but it's getting there. Yeah, it's still early because DevOps automation that is needed, which is very common, and without automation DevOps, you have to have push button deployment. Anybody should be able to deploy. So that kind of automation is still not possible using Docker. Yeah, this is a very fundamental principle. Scaling up is easy, but knowing when to scale down is tough. So, if you have automation the way you have it in the case of AWS, it is possible to set limits and then you can have automatic scaling down happening. But in the case of Docker, it is still not available. So, knowing when to scale down is a tough part. So, that was the session on Docker. The main takeaway was that it's coming. Very soon we will have something like Docker that really is going to replace most of what we are doing in DevOps. Now here are my interesting sound bites. Stop using user stories, start using hypotheses. So at the end of the user story, what you have is a fully functional and tested software. But it should get tested in the market, whether it is satisfying the expected behavior that you are expecting your end users and consumers. If you adopt only one Agile practice, this is what is doing. If there is only one thing that you can do in Agile, what you will do is retrospective. Rest all will go. People will forget what you said or did, but you will never forget how you made them feel. So this again brings the collaborative and cultural part. Look good by making others look good. This is from the keynote address by JC. Look good by making others look good. Make your team look bad and you will start looking bad. Planned work fills capacity, leaving no room for unplanned work. So there should be always some room for unplanned. Don't just plan so that everyone is busy all the time. Thank you. So these are the main takeaways and sound bites. Myself and Hemant have to share. Hemant.
So do you guys have any questions? Not many questions came along the way. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take questions of this. Not claiming any expertise on these topics, but just kind of take away.
Here's a comment on technical debt.
Good point. I don't remember. Did I annotate it in here? I don't think I did. I'll have to look back. I'll look back at the comments. Let me dig it out. What's the rationale behind it?
The point of the metaphor that we're trying to make that came up. Technical debt. Technical debt. But the basis of the metaphor that we're about is that technical debt is a means by which we can hold conversations with the business about the decisions we're making, and that sometimes and the point of it is that if we're making decisions to move faster and absorbing this debt, it's like a business making a decision to use debt, and the consequences of that, I'm going to have to pay that debt off, or there's a cost of servicing that debt. So to say don't, and I've heard of a number of technical people say, the draftsmanship movement is they never accept technical debt of any sort. And that sort of breaks the whole metaphor down. So
that's a good point. Now I'm remembering it was in a technical session, and I can't place exactly. And that was, you're right. So that was the point, was people are misusing the financial analogy of that. That was the point. But your point is valid. But the origin of it is that you use it as a mechanism, as a way to connect with business and make the trade-offs.
it was a way to have a conversation with the business that in fact we are going to make some compromises here, but it means we're absorbing them. And so I think that to some extent that has been
Also, maybe the point here got to the abuse, which is that some developers may abuse that notion that now that there is a bucket called technical debt, so I can put this stuff in there and say, and give the excuse, okay, I need to get the thing to the market path, I didn't do TDD, or I didn't write unit test, or I didn't, do the right thing. So I think that was the point.
So I would say it's probably something I was going to go fast without having a conversation with all the stakeholders who accepting the consequences of that, and that's really bad. But if you have a conversation with everyone, the problem is the business says, yeah, I want to go fast, but since it's your responsibility, you have to service it. That's what the problem is.
Any other questions, any other things we go over there? Okay, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. thanks again, Philip and Vinayak, for tonight's presentation and the highlights of the conference.